Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Binge Factor. I'm Tracy Hazard and I have Jen Francis today. Solo Moms Talk was her first show, but now she's got tools of the podcast trade and she is out there helping podcasters everywhere at the nitty-gritty level. She's got the newest podcasters meetup. She's got all kinds of things going on and she's just fascinating. She's a creator and host of both podcasts I just mentioned, the Solo Moms Talk and Tools of the Podcast Trade. She's a writer and content creator, and she's a mentor who helps people reach their goals. She loves to help people reach their goals. And I just was really completely fascinated by how her insights, the questions that she finds she's asked again and again, because she's down there at that nitty-gritty level of building these events and hearing what people are struggling with. She has great insights into that. So she's going to bring that to us today. And I'm excited for you to hear that because sometimes, and this is something, when we get to be really deep into something, we get so far down the road that we forget what it's like to be new. It's part of the reason why I start a new podcast every single year, because I want to be new. I want to understand what everyone's struggling with today. And it also helps to rise those questions. But even though I'm starting a brand new podcast every year, I'm still bringing all the experiences that I had. So it's really not a fresh, open perspective. And Jen has really developed her model of how she helps people, how she mentors, how she coaches. She's done it in a way where she's always in touch with what's new. What are the new questions? What's a newbie thinking? What's going on in their mind? So let's talk to her because that might really help unstick you if you've been sitting here listening to the Binge Factor, coming back again and again and trying to get that podcast that's deep in your soul started. So let's, Jen Francis, inspire you. Jen, so glad to have you here in Tools of the Podcast Trade. I'm so glad that your show is not all microphones, right? Like it's kind of what I expected from the title, but you know what? You talk about so many different tools. And I think that that's really important to look at podcasting as a trade. So I love that you focused it that way. And you're talking about all kinds of tools, digital tools, real tools on occasion, people who are tools, right? And not in the good way, and to help out. And so I really like that. How did that title come about for you?
So it came about because I was thinking of all the different things that exist in podcasting. I was explaining to someone the other day that podcasting is simple. It's just very detailed. And I realized that the details are necessary to get your show started. And so the term tools kind of came into my brain while I was thinking about the name. And I was like, yeah, that is it. That is tools. And at first I was thinking about microphones and, headphones and all those little things. But then it expanded because I realized hosting is a tool. Guesting is a tool. And so that's how that came about. It was a messy process, but and it made sense to me.
Well, podcast trade is also a great way to think about it because a trade is something you work at for your whole life. It's not something that you like start in and you're an expert.
Right. Yes.
So now Tools of the Podcast Trade is not your first podcast.
No.
So tell us about your first podcast.
So my first podcast is called Solo Moms Talk, and it's my training ground. It was my training ground and actually part of the inspiration for doing tools, because it took me 6 years to actually get that first episode published.
Wow. I don't think
Yes.
I've ever heard. I mean, I've had a lot of people who pod fade, and I had a lot of people who I personally in my company have people who go, we call it missing in action, where they say they want to start a podcast and then they never get started. But 6 years, I think I
Yes.
haven't heard that before.
Yes. And I wasn't not doing anything. I was thinking about it. I was taking courses. I was reading. John Lee Dumas had a little book out that he has on Audible and on Amazon. I was going through that ad nauseum. If you've ever heard of Cliff Ravenscraft, he was like one of the first real
lots of like
people.
editing tools and like tech stuff. Exactly. One of the people who was on my list when I researched and started this show, both of those people were on that, and Pat Flynn as well, who's been on our show. So what was holding you back then?
The bottom line, my mind. The lizard brain took over. I did start something on Blog Talk Radio, but I realized it really wasn't appropriate for what I was trying to do. And then when I discovered John Lee Dumas and You'll Fire, I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. But then I was thinking that it's my story, because the reason I wanted to start Solo Moms Talk, it was to share my story of being a divorced mom and the struggles I went through. And then I also wanted to hear the stories of other solo moms, sharing it with those who the stories would help. But I was like, first it was like, I can't do this. How am I going to do this? Who am I thinking I can do it? And it came down to the point where my voice, nobody wants to hear my voice. My voice not good. And I actually went through and listened to a lot of different podcasts, Amy Porterfield, all the female podcasters, and listened to them, how their voice sound. And then I looked for the one that quote unquote worst voice. Right? I recorded my voice, I listened to it, and then I went and found the quote unquote worst voice. And I'm like, I know that doesn't even sound that bad, and she has a podcast. So that was like my final. This was when I evicted the lizard brain and said, I want to do this. I want to do this. And so because I went through that struggle, and then because I started to hear a lot of questions, because one of the things John Lee Dumas did, I joined his Podcasters Paradise, and he connected me with a guy who wanted to start a podcast. And we co-mentored each other.
Nice.
And I heard the questions, and I realized I was answering the questions, and I was answering them enthusiastically. And I'm like, wow, I know this stuff, and I actually like doing this stuff. And so that's why I started the newest Podcasters Club, and like 30 people joined in like the first month, which was amazing to me, because I didn't even think people were interested in some stranger. I wasn't a brand name. I was just some stranger. And so when I heard the questions, I'm like, yeah, those are the things I went through, and I got my answers. Now I'd like to help these people get their answers. And so the club and Tools of the Trade kind of started around the same time. They kind of went hand in hand. And so I don't remember what your question was, but hopefully
what was holding you back? And you were talking about mindset. And so a lot of that shift happened and support happened, which I really think is the problem for so many podcasters out there. And you have a meetup, US Podcasters Club. And I think that's really what I want to talk with you about today, is that finding that support system can be really what shifts that, whether it's a mindset problem, a tech problem, wherever your problems may lie, not reaching out for help when there are so many willing to extend a hand to podcasters or aspiring ones. That's really what shifted you. Yes,
it was. I realized that I wasn't the only one with questions that seem dumb to me, but they're not really. They're real questions. But one thing I found out and realized is that even when we say we don't know what mic to get, we're really just stalling.
I love that.
Yeah,
Let's
we're
call
just
ourselves
stalling.
out on that, right?
Yeah,
You
we're
know,
just
I
stalling.
I call that there are two forms of procrastination that I found, and I talk about this in one of my many podcasts out there. I think it's in Product Launch Hazards, but there are two forms of procrastination. There's the procrastination where we're stalling and we're not making choices and we're not doing something. And then there is actually procrastination where we like get overly obsessed with and doing, like, let's say editing but never airing our show, or
Yeah.
where we're recording but we're then never airing our show, right? And so
Yeah.
we're obsessing about something that we're like deep diving into, but it is a form of procrastination as well.
Mhm. It is. It is. I had one lady in that group, and she was a coach and a psychologist, and she has like 5 different podcasts she wanted to start, but she wouldn't decide on one and start that one. And she had a bunch of excuses why, one wasn't good enough. She wanted all these. And so, but yeah.
I know. So anyway, well, I'm glad you're calling yourself out on that, because that's what I think we need to do more often, is really
Yeah.
call ourselves out. And when we're we're contributing to the problems that are happening,
Yeah.
and to why something's not moving and not going. And we have to take responsibility for that, because if we can identify it and move through it.
Yes, definitely.
I love that you put that on Solo Moms Talk. 145 episodes. Congratulations. That is a big accomplishment. You're
Thank you.
in the rare territory of people who have done over 100 episodes. And you really should be honored for that in the podcast space here. And your new one is another 37. So you're really, at the time that we're recording this, so you're really getting pretty close to 200 episodes in podcasting world, which makes you an expert. And you should be proud of that. And you should really look at that as an important accomplishment.
Okay. Thank you.
And now, what's next, right? And so that's how we think. What did you learn from Solo Moms that you do differently now in Tools of the Podcast Trade?
I think that I try to get more help with Tools of the Podcast Trade. And bear in mind, because they're two different shows, like Solo Moms Talk is a little messy. Not saying moms are messy, but the life of a solo mom
it's
is
a talk
messy.
show-ish.
And it's
so
right?
Yeah,
So
it's a little more informal, and not, I wouldn't say messy, because I didn't think it sounds messy at all. I mean, authentic and informal would probably be my description of it.
Right. Yes. And then Tools now is more a business podcast. And I'm going to tell you, until about a month ago, I really saw it as just something I was doing, right? And then I was interviewing a gentleman, and he said, I asked him, one of the questions I like to ask my guests is, what are you grateful for today? And he said, well, one of the things, Jen, is that I'm on your podcast. I'm on Tools of the Podcast Trade. And did you know your podcast is number 7 this week in marketing on Good Pods? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, my little teeny weeny podcast. He said, yeah, go check it. Go check it. And I went and I saw that week I was top 100, number 7 in marketing. And then I was something like number 15 in nonprofit podcasting. And I was like, wow, I had no clue. And so I view Tools different now. I view it as a tool that I could use to help not just those who want to start a podcast, but those who don't realize that they need a podcast. I gave a presentation in Playa del Carmen to a bunch of digital nomads, coaches, and different things. And it was a podcast that gave me that courage to go in front of these people and to say, hey, look, you're doing all these things. You need a podcast to help you be better. And so
you are a digital nomad as well, because I just talked to you about this, and you've been all over the place. And right now we're recording and you're in British Columbia. So so I could see now why, when you said Blog Talk Radio didn't fit you,
No, he didn't.
That's
No.
why is
Yes.
one of the main reasons, right?
Yes.
Because that ability to do podcasts from anywhere and have it be in your schedule on,
Yes.
your model, that's a better fit for you.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So digital nomads have the issue of typically having, I'm going to say, inconsistent sound because your space is different all the time.
Yes.
And it's not the microphone, it's the space. Although
Yes.
if you use a too expensive of a microphone, then it actually can make it worse. And that the inexpensive microphones, what we call the directional microphones, do better in any space. And I hear that's what you're using, which is why your sound is good. But it's because we sometimes miss the checklist on setting up in our new space. So we forget to make sure our microphone's actually turned on and things like that happen. Do you have a process you use to make sure that that doesn't happen to you?
So I don't really, and it's one of the things I've been thinking about. I'm actually switching from, this. I've been looking at the Rode video mic, so because I want to publish more. I mean, record more from a mobile standpoint. Since I move so much, I've destroyed like 3 microphones in the last couple of years. I've destroyed headphones because I'm out there in my backpack, and I travel quite a bit. Like, I'm always going places. And so I've decided that I needed to switch from my studio setup, which is what I had and was carrying around with me. And I realized that it didn't work. It doesn't work in an Airbnb that, that have 22 feet ceiling.
It's too much echo and the
yeah,
microphone picks it up. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just, I have like 3 or 4 podcasts that I recorded. And I was in this apartment in Playa, and they have an office, nicest, everything looks good. And then I listened to my interviews after, and I was like, oh my God.
It happens. It happens to all of us. I've had hotel rooms where I thought it would be fine. And then there's this horrendous air conditioning sound.
Yeah.
So you never know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and you're thinking about some new equipment and some changes to that. I'm going to say that I would really, make sure you get a microphone you can return. Because 9 times out of 10, I find when a microphone comes in, until somebody fails, they test it and they're like, oh, this sounds great. And then when they go to really record it, like, a week or 2 later, it doesn't work. So make sure you got a good return policy. You have time to return it.
Okay.
Because you may find out when you get that recording back that it's not as good as you thought it would be. The more expensive a microphone, in, I'm going to say, a less sound controlled space can actually be worse.
Yes.
And especially one that has a lot of settings or options. And a lot of times the options that they tell you in the instruction sheet are the opposite of what you should do in an uncontrolled sound environment. So we see that all the time with the Yetis and with the with some of the Rodes, not all of them, but some of them. And definitely with some of the really expensive high-end mics, they can be just never work in an open environment. I personally, and people are shocked at it, I actually have a glass desk, and you would never know it. You would think this microphone wouldn't work, and I've got an ATR. And I love the Audio Technica because it's directional mic, and that's what you're using. The directionalness of it keeps it from picking up sound from all over the place. And so I've actually found it to be really good. But there are exceptions. I don't have 20-foot ceilings. So, there are some exceptions even to that. And that might be actually, instead of having your mic pointed up like you do, pointing it straight at you if you've got a big environment with tall ceilings. Because it won't pick up on the sides of the mic. It only picks up down the front. So if it's pointed upwards, it might be actually bouncing off the ceiling.
Yeah. Thank you.
And there we go. Let's chat about tools, right? This is what I think you do so well, Jen. I think that you do so well in being open to ideas from your guests, from the people you talk to at your meetups, and then saying, here's what I've experienced, and will this be a solution to it? And that openness to coaching, that openness to new ideas is why your show is getting better and better. And it's why people are going to come and continue to binge on it and listen again and again and share it with others.
Yes.
And that is rare. I find podcasters sometimes they do it their way, they get set in their ways, and they're closed off. And you are not one of those podcasters.
I try not to be, because I realize, especially for that show, it's not about me. And I've learned that if I'm blogging about an article, if I'm blogging an article about something, I always put myself in the reader's shoe to say, are they going to understand this, or is this going to help them? So it's something I've been working on, is putting myself in my listeners and my readers' shoe.
I love that. And I do love that you have a blog. And so we will definitely link to the blog post for the episodes and other things that you've got at yours. But I love that you're blogging, because that is a great tool for drawing in new listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And people forget that. They think it's only the audio. That's all that ever matters. And some people are like, oh, and it's only social. But blogging, social media, videos, like you're going to move to doing more of, all of those things actually do contribute to people finding your show and consuming it in their favorite format, whether it's the summary articles you write or it's the video. They'll find what they're looking for based on that. And all those media types. So I'm so proud of you for doing all of that, because it's a lot of work. I know it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. What's your favorite part about the new show? Because it's different than the old show. So what's your favorite part about Tools of the Podcast Trade?
It's learning, especially learning from my guests.
So it's the guest interactions, that relationship building.
Yeah. And they're it's podcasting in general is great for this, especially when you're interviewing guests. You meet people from all over the world. You meet people you'd never normally meet. But when I talk to people like Vinny Potestivo, and
I've had him on the show here too.
I mean, he's a riot. And when you learn things like one of the episodes I get the most feedback is from the guy who created Creators Legal, Eric, I've forgotten his last name right now, but he talked about the legal aspects of podcasting and how you should have a guest release and stuff like that. And when I have those guests on and I realize that I'm getting an education, not just in podcasting, but in business, it is my favorite. And then the second part of it is that
Eric Farber. That's who you're talking
Eric
about.
Farber,
I just looked it up in your feed, so we would be able to give him credit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Such great advice, though, right? Like you're starting to think about the podcasting as, how's it fit, and how does my business grow around it, and what else can I apply? And I think that's really great. It's one of my favorite parts about it is getting new perspectives from my guests too.
Yes. So we're not just picking up the mic and putting out a recording. We're actually doing something that's impacting someone. And so it's exciting stuff.
Well, and I also really do like that you follow the model of different lengths for your show. So I thought that maybe when I was first checking out your show, and of course, as my listeners know, I do always check out and listen to all of my podcasters' shows. And if they've got more than one, I do like to listen to their earlier show just to check out, like, is it stylistically different? Like, what was about it? But even in that show, you had sometimes shows that were 10 minutes and sometimes shows that were 45 minutes. And you really just had a range. And it seems that you followed that instinct early on, that the show needed to be as long as it needed to be, and not, I'm going to, be strict about it.
Yes. I actually did do that deliberately, because if someone comes on and want to talk and it just seems like what they're saying is going to be useful, then, and I always say to them, this is us. We're the producer, we're the director. We say cut when we say cut. And so
I'm so glad you said that. I love that you said that. That was so profound. Editors, I want you to all listen to that. Social media. That's our social media clip right there, what Jen just said.
Yes. So, you have something useful to say it. And then, if we have to edit something out, we do it. But usually we don't. So, yeah.
But, this is the difference. I think that sometimes I actually don't, as a binge listener, and I am a binge listener of shows, when a show is strictly an hour, I lose interest in it a lot faster than a show that has a variety of times, because I know when I see a variety of times like that, you're respecting me as a listener and you're respecting yourself as the person doing all that work. And so if it's not interesting to you, you're going to cut it off short. Or if it just got to the point and it was done, you're going to end it. And I'm going to have a better takeaway than if you just live up to the hour because you committed to an hour.
Right.
And that's really early on. I feel that a lot of podcasters don't heed that. And it seems that you've been doing it pretty much since early on in your days, which is rare from a podcaster that learned from the old, I'm going to call it from the old school model from, John and Pat and Clint and all of those people. There was more of a rule about keeping to a time slot.
Right.
But those of us that abandoned that quickly, I think we ended up with better shows, and because our listeners felt respected.
Yeah. I believe that too. Yes, sure.
So tell us about the U.S. Podcasters Club. I heard your episode that you were like excited about the meetup. So tell us a little bit about that and why you're so excited about it.
Okay, so it's actually called the New West Podcasters Club, because when I started it, I was living in New Westminster, BC at the time.
West. Oh,
New
I
West,
thought it said U.S.
Yes, New West.
New West.
Yes.
My mistake.
I shortened it to New West because a lot of the people who joined they're actually not just from Canada, they are also across the US. And so I figured if I put New West, it's a lot less specific. And so
they don't have to be local because it's a virtual meetup?
It's a virtual meetup. It's always been. And I actually still don't see a reason to have a physical meetup unless we need to. So, yeah.
No, because you draw a broader audience of, more interest from all over. So, especially because you're traveling all over. So you're meeting people from various places who want to join.
Yes, definitely. So, so I started it, and because I thought it would help people. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just said, let me put it out there and see if people are interested. And there were. And I actually, through starting that, the first 2 months, I got an invitation to speak at the local library about podcasting. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because of COVID, but I was proud of myself that I actually did get that invitation. So we meet almost monthly. Sometimes we have a long break, and people always seem to have questions. They come with their notebooks, and they want to know how, and they want to know why you would do it that way, and why, so it really gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to answer those questions. And actually one time I had one of the guests that I interviewed, attend one of those meetings. So it was a gentleman who was on the road for 4 years with his family, RVing across the US, and he was podcasting. And I wanted him to come and tell his story to this group, and he did. And the members of the group, they just loved him. They were asking him all kinds. I just let him take over the show, the time, and just answered, just ask and answered, So it was really good, and I'm excited about doing stuff like that and having more guests come and talking to these individuals.
I love that. It's really great. What is the most common question you get from people who haven't started a show yet?
The most common question is, how do I get my show up? It's like...
So there's still this mystery around how hosting works, how the RSS feed works.
Yes, there's a lot of mystery of how do I get it there? Yes.
Jen, this is an aha to me. Yeah. No one has said that to me yet.
Yeah.
And as being a common question, the most common question usually is like, what mic should I use? Which I wish it wasn't the question, because like, it's not the point.
Yeah.
But so, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that is actually almost the biggest thing, because a lot of them, they bought a mic. They're like, well, I guess in their mind they figure I'm gonna need a mic. They just bought a mic. They didn't even bother to ask what mic. They just bought a mic. But then they have a mic and they're like, I know I'm supposed to be here on the internet, or
and how do I get it from here to there?
From here
right?
to there. And that seems to be
Wow.
the most profound, the most prevalent question.
Well, shame on us who
kind
own
of
hosting
weird, yeah.
companies that we have not done a good job of explaining something that we think of as simple technology and old school technology. I mean, our RSS feed is a very old school thing.
Yeah.
So, wow, shame on all of us in the industry to not do a good job there. And
Yeah.
I am going to take what you just said there and make it my mission to figure that out in the next few months, how we can get that message across properly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about existing podcasters? What do they say when they've started a show, they've gotten it out there, but they're struggling? What, those that are probably within 25 episodes, because I think they start to figure things out after that, but within that early stage, where they're at the most risk to quit their show. What do you hear from them? What is the most common issue or question?
I think a lot of it for them is, well, it's twofold. One is, how do I make money doing this? Because, I guess now it's starting to cost money, or it's starting to look like they're going to need to pay somebody for something. Usually it's editing, or they've been paying for hosting, and, money got to come from somewhere.
That's
right. So that's a common question, is how am I going to make money to pay for this? And then the other thing was with the editing, is that they'll struggle with the editing themselves, but they'll also want to hire somebody to do it. Because
that's quickly want to give up that role.
Yeah.
Very few people want to keep doing it.
Yes, right? Because I think it takes a special person to actually do that stuff.
Well, so you know that I own a company, Podetize, that we do this. And to be honest with you, I really wish people wouldn't edit. I wish you would strategize your show to have no editing as a part of it and only need it on rare occasions. You have a bad sound issue or something went wrong and you need some support, but to, in the beginning, strategize to not use it. So that you could spend any budget or money or time, because your time is the most valuable, to growing your listener base and engaging with your audience and getting better guests. Because if you spent your time and energy and money there, you're more likely to stick with it to the stage at which you're making money with your show, and then you can afford editing, right? I feel like it needs to be a later consideration rather than an early consideration, unless you, of course, have a big company and your brand needs it, right? From the beginning, because if you didn't have a professional show, Meetup, we were talking about that. The Meetup has a podcast, and if it wasn't professionally edited, I think people would be wondering, what were they doing there, right? So, thinking about that. But I really wish that wasn't the question. I really wish they would think about doing a non-editing version of it earlier. And I think that doesn't occur to people because there's too many people out there selling them stuff.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I say this as a company who makes money from that, right? But I really wish there was, we have self-service, we have self-editing, we have tools like that. But I think people feel really daunted by it and they think it's too hard. And so if that's too hard, then maybe we should have a no edit model. We have
that would be nice.
no code coding. We should have no edit podcasting. Maybe that needs to be the phrase. Right?
Yeah. And for me, I don't know if I could stop editing, not because I like editing per se, but because it gives me joy listening to those interviews again. I can't explain it. It's how I do the show notes, because I listen to it again and
you write your articles
writing.
That way too.
Yes. And so at first it was about editing, because I wanted to be perfect, but then Pat Flynn said something that really had me clapping my hand. He said, stop cutting out those oohs and ahs, because it sounds so robotic when you do, because people don't talk like that, you know?
Well, and I think that he's actually wrong that most people don't over edit themselves when they're doing like the main editing. It's the auto tools and the auto tuning stuff that it gets, if you apply them, sometimes they go too far.
Yes.
And and that's where I hear more and more of these AI tools ruining a show that was good before.
Yeah.
It was good in its authentic stage. And I really wish people would do it. Use it for the good stuff like sound leveling. When you can't hear your guests because their microphone's not as good as yours, that's bad. You want to make them sound good, like improve that.
Yeah.
Use it to cut out something that you was like just not valuable from a content piece.
Yes.
But leave in the authenticity of how you speak, because the beauty of the difference between you and I, Jen, is that you're considered in the way you speak. You take your time, you reflect. And then on the contrast to that, I'm fast, right? And that's okay. That's nice. That there's a place for both of us in the podcasting world where people are going to have an affinity for that. And if you ruined it to make it sound more like me, that's not good.
True.
Yeah. Well, Jen, I am so glad you are part of this podcasting community and such a big proponent of it. I look forward to seeing how you can make money doing this. But what I'd love for you to share with the audience is what your biggest return on investment from doing your show is.
I hate to sound trite in saying this, but it's the personal satisfaction. Yes, if I was making dollars from it, that would be great. I'm not, I wouldn't say I wouldn't welcome that. But the personal satisfaction of knowing that I answered somebody's question so that they could move forward with that dream. Because podcasting for me is a big deal. I got this done. I got this done twice. And I know somebody who's struggling because they have this message and they can't see the forest for the trees. So the return on investment, I'm going to tell you, the first guy that I did the co-mentoring with, he started a podcast. It's called The Prison Post. And look up The Prison Post and you'll see how successful that podcast is. And when I see stuff like that, that's the ROI for me.
Oh, I so agree. Like, I feel like I'm so proud of the podcasters who stick with it, who keep going, who keep bringing their message out to the world. And I think that if I had a little piece in that and creating those ripples of impact, that's all I need. Like, I think we all should be making money and we should be rewarded for doing that. And so I hope that you will be shortly. But I really do also think that the ripples that you're creating in the world have to come back to you.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Jen, thank you so much for bringing your podcast into the world. Tools of the Podcast Trade, fantastic show. And for those of you who are interested, go check out Solo Moms Talk too and see how it all got started.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate you talking to me today.
Jen Francis just amazes me. I just love talking with her. I had so much fun. We had such a great time. She's so down to earth. She so understands that struggle for how you figure things out. And, I forget that often. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm a how-to girl, right? So this stuff, I have great confidence in how to be your guide, how to do that. Jen does too, but she doesn't forget to stay in touch with the fact that that's not your forte. Right? That may not be your thing. And how can she meet you right at your level, support you, and guide you through? That's the sign of a great coach and a great mentor. And Tools of the Podcast Trade is a great show because of it, because she's always thinking about what you might want to hear and how you need to hear it and bringing it to you in different ways. So you're going to want to check out that show if you haven't started your show yet, and you are looking for someone to help be your guide along the way. So we, of course, are always here at the Binge Factor and at Podetize to support you as well. But I think that hearing other voices is so critically important in this process. And that's why I've been bringing you more podcast managers, more podcast strategists, more coaches and mentors than me, because maybe I'm not the right person for you. right? So you need to find someone who's going to help unstick you, help get you moving, get you off of that procrastination and get you moving into podcasting and discover what it's really like to be a fabulous content creator who's getting more from their show. So get inspired by Jen Francis, go check out Tools of the Podcast Trade, and don't forget to go and check out the blog post for this episode so you can link up to everything. She shared some things with us that I've got the links all for you. So make sure you go to theirs and then you can check out her next meetup. Wouldn't that be fantastic? So thanks everyone for listening. I look forward to bringing you more successful podcasters and more of these wonderful coaches and mentors in the podcasting industry right here on the Binge Factor every single week.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.